Brilliance can illuminate the world, but what happens when the brightest minds are haunted by their own thoughts? Asterisk, throughout history, humanity has been captivated by the mystery of intelligence. We admire the genius of great thinkers, celebrate the innovations of scientists, and are astonished by the creativity of artists. Yet beneath this admiration lies a quieter, darker truth. Intelligence is not always a gift wrapped in light. Sometimes it is a burden. Sometimes brilliance turns dangerous. Sometimes the people who carry the weight of genius fear not the outside world, but their own thoughts. This video explores the hidden side of intelligence, the secret reason why truly smart people often fear the very depths of their own minds. We'll journey through philosophy, psychology, history, and human experience, unraveling how brilliance can transform into isolation, how insight can become terror, and why the brightest flames sometimes burn themselves before they can burn the story begins with a question. What is intelligence really? For most, intelligence means quick problem solving, high test scores, or the ability to learn fast. But true intelligence runs deeper. It is not just about solving puzzles, but about perceiving reality at levels most people overlook. It is about noticing the subtle inconsistencies in life, the contradictions in society, the terrifying truths that ordinary minds filter out in order to live comfortably. For the average person, daily existence is softened by illusions of certainty, purpose, meaning, and permanence. We tell ourselves stories to feel safe, that the future is predictable, that justice always wins, that love will conquer loneliness, that hard work guarantees reward. But the highly intelligent person sees through these illusions. They realize the future is fragile, justice is inconsistent, love can fail, and hard work often goes unnoticed. To live with such awareness is to live without blinders. And that can be profoundly unsettling. This is the secret most people don't know. The mind that sees too much often struggles to rest. When others sleep peacefully, reassured by comforting. Myths: the brilliant person lies awake, haunted by unfiltered truths. Their intelligence refuses to turn off. It spins, analyzes, questions, and dissects reality until what once felt solid begins to dissolve into uncertainty. And here lies the root of their fear. Not fear of the world, but fear of the world. But fear of the endless labyrinth inside their own minds. Philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer observed this phenomenon in his writings on solitude and intellect. He believed that the more intelligent a person is, the more likely they are to seek distance from society, not because they despise people, but because they recognize the exhausting illusions upon which society is built. Social conventions, small talk, cultural priorities, these things feel shallow when compared to the vast depth of thought in which their minds constantly swim. For them, solitude is not loneliness. It is survival. Yet solitude has two faces. On one side, it is a sanctuary for creativity, wisdom, and originality. On the other, it can become a chamber of echoes where unfiltered thoughts grow louder and more relentless. The intelligent person risks becoming trapped in their own awareness, haunted by thoughts they cannot escape. This is why intelligence, at its highest intensity, is terrifying. Not because it sees less than others, but because it sees too much. Consider history's greatest geniuses. Nietzsche, the philosopher who declared God is dead, spent his final years in mental collapse, overwhelmed by the weight of his own thoughts. Virginia Woolf, one of the most brilliant writers of the modern age, was tormented by voices in her mind until she walked into a river and never returned. Van Gogh painted beauty the world had never seen, but the same mind that gave him vision also drove him to despair. Again and again, history shows us the double-edged nature of brilliance. The very minds that illuminate the world often struggle in darkness within. But why does this happen? Why does intelligence so often turn into torment? Psychology offers one explanation: overthinking. A highly intelligent brain is like a supercomputer that never shuts down. It processes every possibility, every angle, every outcome. It anticipates failure, analyzes mistakes, imagines dangers even when none exist. What others dismiss, the intelligent person magnifies. What others overlook, they obsess over. This constant storm of thought can lead to anxiety, depression, and self-doubt. In this way, intelligence is both a strength and a vulnerability. Another explanation lies in the search for meaning. Ordinary minds can rest in cultural narratives, religion, tradition, routine. But the brilliant person questions everything. They ask, why am I here? What is the point of all this? What if meaning itself is just an invention to calm our fears? To live with such questions is to carry a weight most cannot imagine. It is to stare into the abyss of existence and realize the abyss stares back, and yet this very struggle gives intelligence its power. Out of fear comes art. Out of despair comes philosophy. Out of loneliness comes discovery. The reason humanity has poetry, music, science, and philosophy is because certain minds were unwilling or unable to rest inside the comfort of illusion. They dared to follow their thoughts, even when it led them into terrifying places. Doing so, they gave the world not just knowledge, but wisdom. Still, for the individual genius, the battle remains. To be constantly aware is exhausting. To see too much is isolating. To think too deeply is dangerous. And so, many intelligent people live in conflict with society, with others, and most of all, with themselves. Their own thoughts are both their greatest gift and their greatest enemy. This is the paradox of intelligence. The brighter the light, the darker the shadows it casts. The fear of one's own thoughts is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet, subtle, and disguised as restlessness. A highly intelligent person may appear calm, even ordinary, to those around them. They go to work, meet friends, laugh at jokes, and function like everyone else. But within, their minds are restless oceans. Waves of thought crash endlessly against the shore of their consciousness, eroding any sense of peace. They may lie awake at night, replaying conversations, analyzing decisions, questioning their beliefs, and imagining futures that may never arrive. This endless inner dialogue becomes both a curse and a companion. To silence it would feel like losing themselves, but to live with it feels like being haunted. Psychologists call this rumination repeatedly cycling through thoughts, unable to let them go. For the average person, rumination might occur during times of stress. For the deeply intelligent, it can become a permanent condition, shaping their entire experience of life. They are not only aware of what happened yesterday or what might happen tomorrow, they are aware of what could happen in 1,000 different futures, both good and bad, and this awareness, magnified endlessly, breeds fear. But fear of what? Not necessarily fear of failure or of others, but fear of their own potential to unravel. Fear that their thoughts might reveal truths they are not prepared to face. Fear that their mind might betray them, pulling them into despair, paranoia, or madness. This fear is not imaginary, it is real, because history shows us that many of the brightest thinkers did in fact descend into psychological torment. The line between genius and madness is thin. Psychiatrists and neuroscientists have studied this connection for decades. Research suggests that certain traits associated with creativity and intelligence, such as divergent thinking, heightened sensitivity, and abstract reasoning, are also linked to vulnerability to mood disorders. In other words, the very brain. Wiring that allows brilliance may also open the door to suffering. Take, for example, Sylvia Plath, a poet whose words pierced into the raw essence of human pain. She possessed extraordinary sensitivity and intelligence. Yet that same sensitivity turned inward, magnifying her despair until it consumed her. Or consider Nikola Tesla, a visionary inventor whose ideas shaped the modern world. His genius was undeniable, but he also lived in isolation, tormented by obsessive rituals and irrational fears. To study their lives is to witness both the gift and the danger of extraordinary intelligence. This duality raises a question. Are highly intelligent people doomed to suffer? Not necessarily. Many find ways to channel their restless thoughts into creativity, discovery, or problem solving. They build art, write literature, design technology, or invent philosophies that reshape society. But even then, the cost is real. Their creations may inspire the world, but behind them lies sleepless nights, relentless questioning, and a private struggle invisible to the public eye. This is why truly intelligent people sometimes appear withdrawn or detached. They are not always antisocial by choice, they are exhausted by the constant weight of their own thinking. Social interactions, small talk, and surface-level conversations can feel unbearable because their minds are already operating at such depth. To talk about whether when they are contemplating mortality feels absurd. To debate trivial matters while pondering the meaning of existence feels alien. And so, many retreat into solitude, not out of arrogance, but out of necessity. But solitude itself can be dangerous. When alone, the mind is free to wander unchecked. It roams into the darkest corners, dredging up memories, doubts, and fears. Without external anchors, friends, routines, distractions, the intelligent mind risks spiraling inward until it becomes trapped in its own labyrinth. Consider the metaphor of a mirror. For most people, the mind is like a window, looking outward into the world. For the highly intelligent, the mind becomes a mirror, reflecting endlessly upon itself. Each reflection spawns another question, another possibility, another doubt. Soon, the mirror becomes a hall of mirrors, stretching infinitely, impossible to escape. And within this endless reflection, fear grows. Some of this fear is existential. Intelligent people are often painfully aware of mortality, while others push away the thought of death. Choosing distraction or denial, the brilliant mind cannot help but confront it directly. They realize life is fragile, time is short, and everything we build eventually dissolves into nothing. This awareness can be paralyzing. It creates a sense of urgency, but also of futility. Why strive? Why create? Why hope? When all things end. Others fear their own capacity for darkness. Intelligence reveals not only the beauty of the world, but also its cruelty. A brilliant person can imagine horrors more vividly, understand manipulation more deeply, and foresee conflicts more clearly. In this way, their intelligence can frighten them. They may ask, if I can imagine such darkness, am I capable of it? Myself? Can my own mind betray me, turning my insight into destruction? This fear of self is ancient. Even in mythology, brilliant figures were often portrayed as dangerous. Prometheus, who brought fire to humanity, was punished eternally for his daring. Icarus, who flew too high with wings of genius, fell into the sea. The stories remind us that intelligence carries risk, that brilliance must be balanced with caution, or it leads to downfall. But perhaps the greatest fear of all is meaninglessness. The more intelligent a person is, the more likely they are to see the fragility of meaning. They recognize that much of what society values, money, fame, power, is constructed, not absolute. They realize that morality, too, shifts across cultures and eras. What is praised as virtue in one century may be condemned in another. To live with this awareness is to live without stable ground. It is like walking across a bridge that never stops shaking, and yet out of this instability comes something extraordinary. Many of humanity's greatest breakthroughs came from individuals willing to question meaning itself. Albert Camus, the philosopher of absurdism, declared that life is meaningless, but insisted we must rebel by creating our own meaning anyway. His philosophy was not a denial of despair, but a transformation of it. In this way, fear of one's own thoughts can become not just a burden, but a source of power. The story of brilliant minds fearing their own thoughts is not a story about weakness. It is a story about awareness. The higher the intelligence, the greater the sensitivity to the forces that shape existence. Like a telescope aimed at the night sky, their minds reveal more stars, more galaxies, more darkness. But with that expanded vision comes an unavoidable truth. The universe is vast. It's cold and indifferent. For the average person, ignorance is a shield. They may live without asking why the stars exist or what their own consciousness truly means. They are content with simple explanations, traditions, and routines. But for the deeply intelligent, ignorance is impossible. Their minds pierce through illusions, demanding answers even when none exist. This relentless search for truth is both noble and terrifying. Take Friedrich Nietzsche. His philosophical brilliance reshaped how humanity thinks about morality, religion, and power. Yet his relentless questioning drove him into madness in the final years of his life. He stared too deeply into the abyss of existence, and in doing so, the abyss consumed him. His story is a chilling reminder that brilliance without balance can fracture the very mind that carries it. But why does this happen? Why should the act of thinking itself lead to fear? The answer lies in the nature of the human brain. The brain is not built for constant overanalysis. For most of human history, survival depended on quick decisions, not endless rumination. A rustle in the bushes meant danger. Hesitation could mean death. Our ancestors thrived by acting, not by contemplating the meaning of life. But highly intelligent minds override this ancient wiring. Instead of silencing thoughts, they magnify them. They ask not only what is happening now, but also what could happen, what should happen, and what does it mean? This endless expansion of possibility overwhelms the brain's emotional circuits, triggering anxiety and fear. Neuroscience supports this idea. Studies show that highly intelligent people often have more active default mode networks, the brain system associated with self-reflection and imagination. This network allows for creativity and abstract thought, but when overactive, it traps individuals in loops of self-consciousness and doubt. In other words, the same network that gives rise to genius also generates fear. This explains why many brilliant figures describe their own minds as prisons. They cannot escape their thoughts, even when those thoughts terrify them. Virginia Woolf, the legendary writer, once described her mind as both a sanctuary and a battlefield. Her creativity poured out in revolutionary novels, but her inner battles eventually became unbearable. She, too, succumbed to the darkness she could not silence. And yet, we should not mistake this fear as purely destructive. Fear can also be fuel. Many breakthroughs in science, philosophy, and art emerged precisely because intelligent minds confronted their deepest fears instead of avoiding them. Consider the case of Søren Kierkegaard. The Danish philosopher, he was consumed by anxiety, haunted by the question of meaning in a world without certainty. But instead of collapsing under the weight of his thoughts, he transformed them into philosophy. He gave us existentialism, a framework for understanding human freedom, choice, and despair. In his suffering, he forged insights that continue to shape modern thought. This dual role of fear as both curse and catalyst defines the experience of genius. Intelligent people fear their own thoughts because they know those thoughts have the power to either destroy them or elevate them. They walk a tightrope between despair and discovery, between silence and revelation. But the question remains, what makes these fears so terrifying compared to ordinary worries? The answer lies in scale. Ordinary people fear losing a job, being rejected, or facing illness. These are real fears, but they are concrete and specific. Brilliant people, on the other hand, often fear ideas themselves. They fear questions like, is free will an illusion? Is morality real? Or just a construct? Does life have any meaning at all? These questions do not have definitive answers. They stretch endlessly, leaving the mind suspended in uncertainty. And for many, that uncertainty is unbearable. Yet there is beauty here too. The same uncertainty that terrifies also opens the door to possibility. To recognize that life has no fixed meaning is also to realize we can create our own. To accept that morality is not absolute is also to embrace the freedom to define our values. To know that death is inevitable is also to savor the preciousness of life. This paradox is the secret reason why highly intelligent people often create the most profound art. It's philosophy and science. They transform their fear into expression, their despair into discovery. They do not erase their fear. They use it as raw material, but still, the danger never disappears. History shows us countless examples of brilliant people undone by the very thoughts that once inspired them. John Nash, the mathematical genius, revolutionized economics and game theory, yet struggled for years with schizophrenia, haunted by delusions born of his own brilliant but unrestrained mind. David Foster Wallace, whose writing illuminated the modern human condition, could not escape his own cycles of depression. Their lives remind us that brilliance is not immunity. It is vulnerability magnified. So what can be learned from this? Perhaps the lesson is not to fear fear itself, but to learn how to live with it. Intelligent people cannot silence their thoughts, but they can guide them. They can use discipline, creativity, and connection with others as anchors. They can learn, as many philosophers suggest, that while truth may be uncertain, meaning can still be chosen. This is why many geniuses ultimately find solace not in answers, but in creation. Paint, write, compose, build, or teach not, because it silences the fear, but because it gives the fear form. By externalizing their thoughts, they make the unbearable more bearable. They transform private terror into shared wisdom, and in doing so, they show the rest of us something extraordinary. That even the most terrifying thoughts can become a gift when courage meets creativity. And so we return to the hidden truth. The secret reason really smart people fear their own thoughts is not weakness, but awareness. Their brilliance allows them to see what others overlook, but it also forces them to face questions that have no easy answers. For some, this becomes a burden too heavy to carry. For others, it becomes the spark that lights the world with new ideas, art, and discoveries. The same mind that terrifies itself can also inspire millions. Perhaps the real lesson is this: our thoughts are not enemies. They are mirrors, revealing both our shadows and our light. The difference lies in what we choose to do with them. Fear may whisper, but creation can roar louder. In the end, genius is not about avoiding fear. It's about transforming it into something that matters. And that is why, even though brilliant people fear their own thoughts, the world often remembers them not for their fears, but for their courage to face them.